is recorded. Really excited, especially when we can bring together our valued nonprofit partners and customers together to tell a story. Obviously, how to optimize the Teams phone or, frankly, just the telephony platform all up is something that a lot of organizations, notwithstanding a lot of nonprofits, are continuing to explore. And so what we really wanted to dive into today is how three specific ones have done so with a partner of ours called UniVoIP. And so I'm going to introduce Dean here in a moment. He's going to be shepherding a kind of a roundtable discussion with leaders in the nonprofit IT space that have successfully optimized their team's telephony platform. So we want to talk today about how their platform has positively impacted communication and collaboration within the organizations, some of the North Stars, some of the learnings, pain points that they were able to address, and learnings across the journey. So briefly about me, Carson Hetty, I lead our Americas team for Microsoft Tech for Social Impact. I've been here 10 years and have always really tried to bring these educational, events to our customers. So I was ecstatic whenever we were able to not only secure some time with a treasured partner like UniVoIP, but also some of our nonprofit leaders. So thank you so much for being a part of the session today. And without further ado, Dean, I'll turn it to you. We'll have a few folks that are kind of watching the chat. If there's some questions that might pop up throughout, but really excited about the dialogue today. And if anybody wants a copy of the recording, we will be sending that out after the fact as well. So thank you all for your time. Dean, take it away.
Yeah. Thank you, Carson. I really appreciate it. I was just looking at a Gartner report about Microsoft Unified Communications as a Service, and they are in fact the leader for Unified Communications as a Service for the past 5 years running. And as far as I'm concerned, if somebody's using Microsoft Teams for internal collaboration, there is no good reason for them to use a third-party phone system. So that's my 2 cents on it. I'm going to go ahead and make the introductions with our panelists, and really, really appreciate your time, guys. I know 2 of you have already completed your journey to getting off of a legacy phone system over to Microsoft Teams, and one of you is in the process. So with that, let me just ask each one of you to introduce yourself and tell us a little about your organization and how you impact your community. So first up, Paul Corigliano is IT leader over at Jewish Family Services of San Diego. Paul?
Good morning, everybody. So I have been in the IT field for the last 35 years. I started with Jewish Family Service in April of 2021. The organization was founded in 1918, and we are a pretty large nonprofit. We've grown a lot since my start, from 337 employees to over 540 employees. We have between 60 and 80 programs that provide social services to the surrounding communities in San Diego County and Riverside County. Anything from nutrition assistance, economic mobility and opportunity, children and youth, adults and families, older adults, refugees and immigration, Center for Jewish Care, loans, desert, and some things in Palm Springs around unhoused individuals. So we're constantly doing, we have very, very rapid pace, and we are always looking a way to enhance our technology so that we can provide better services to our clients.
Thank you, Paul. And David Mata is IT leader over at Central Valley Regional Center. And they've successfully replaced the premises-based solution with Teams, and I'm happy to report that they've completed that journey, and hopefully they'll share some of their experience with everyone. So David, can you tell us a little about Central Valley and Regional Center and what you guys do?
Yeah, Central Valley Regional Center is one of 21 regional centers around the state, serving different areas of the state for intellectual disabilities. And so we're kind of a nonprofit that operates on behalf of DDS, Department of Developmental Services. And so we basically offer services. We do social work, outreach to families. We make sure all the services are linked up so that families aren't burdened with many of the things they have to accomplish with some of those needs of their family. And so we do a lot of billing. We have close to 650 staff right now. We grew quite a bit over the past, I want to say, 2 or 3 years. We've hired probably about 200 staff or more. So we're a growing center. This area of Fresno County and pretty much Central Valley is going to be growing in the long run. And so UniVoIP's been very helpful for us. We basically have expanded quite a bit for social services, and yeah, it's been very critical for us.
Thank you, David. And last but not least, Cameron Cox is IT leader over at South Bay Workforce Investment Board. Cameron, he is at the early part of the journey. He's still going through the proof of concept. He's got his IT team already on Teams, but he's basically, having a lot of the questions that David and Paul had at the very beginning. But he has started that process. And Cameron, can you tell us a little about your organization?
Sure. We're a workforce board. There's 20 workforce boards in Southern California. I think there's 8 or 10 in South California. We basically help adults, dislocated worker, and youth get back into the job market. We're a nonprofit grant funded by county, state, and Fed grants. We have 8 offices, and we have about 160 end users with phones or endpoints. And we started 5 months ago converting. It's a phased approach, kind of a hybrid approach where everybody is used to extension dialing and had not used Teams at all. So my approach has been to get our teams working for everybody, especially the people who work from home. We're allowed 1 day every other week to work from home, so that forces everybody to start using Teams. And now management all have Teams installed, and the challenge I'm having is basically extension dialing and the cultural change.
Yep. Extension dialing is one of those things that was a necessity 20 years ago because you had this little phone, and the only way you could reach somebody by abbreviating some digits. And you had a printout. You look at the printout, and then you dial the extension. Now you can just go into the Teams client and just start typing the first few letters of the person's name. It comes up. You click. You can see presence. You can see, your recent chats, and then you can escalate into a phone call. So, Paul, can you tell us a little about your environment prior to Microsoft Teams? What did that look like?
You sure you really want to know?
Just the highlight or the low light. However you want.
So there were two environments, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to go back to we were using a Link server way back when, before I started, and they migrated to this third-party, third-tier provider because it had a connection with one of our subsidiaries, and it was fully managed, and it was located in New Jersey on the East Coast. Pennsylvania on the East Coast. And there were a lot of challenges with that in the way of support and it being fully managed. Everything's done by a ticket. We had some limited functionality on it, but we had a lot of voice quality issues. We had a lot of disconnected calls. In the transition to that new provider, they didn't have phones for 3 to 4 months. Call queues, as we know them today, were called hunt groups there. They were at a premium. For each hunt group, there was a charge. For each VRU that we set up for each one of our programs, there was a charge. It was a very cumbersome system. We were locked into a contract. We partnered with UniVoIP. We were able to set up a proof of concept. and work through all of those things. And so we're very, very grateful. We're in a much, much better place today.
Thanks, Paul. I remember some of the challenges we had just identifying your existing phone numbers.
Right. Yep.
You know, just there wasn't a clear answer on, you know, how many phone numbers there are and how many of them are actually in use. And so that was a challenge in itself, something you don't normally think about when you're migrating.
Yeah, my analogy for that is we were given a lot of breadcrumbs and trying to assemble a loaf of bread.
Yeah. So, David, I know you went from a premises-based system, and how was that like prior to your migration in terms of support and user experience?
Well, we came from basically a Cisco shop. We had that for everything, including the phones, and we were using expressways with licensing and stuff like that. It was very hard to understand as far as how the licensing was coming into effect of everything. But yeah, it was very unstable because it was basically using expressways to connect to our PRI lines. Staff were calling from home during COVID, and it was just dropping calls left and right. We had multiple technicians on it. I want to say sometimes we're down for like 2 or 3 hours, and it was just very difficult to maintain that system. Um, we used a lot of contract hours just to get that system running whenever it needed to, but it was mainly something with expressways. They kept going down. And they always encourage us to move to the more expensive platform. But at the time, we are just really disappointed by the way that technology was working for us. Because you're going through the internet, then you're going into the building, then you're going through these expressways, then through the PRI lines. It's really hard to discover what's really going on. Is it our network? Is it the expressways? So it wasn't the best system for us to use, but that's when we started looking around for different systems that would work for the phones.
Not only did you have some working from home, but you also have, I believe, 3 different offices. Am I correct? Am I recalling this correctly? 3 different separate offices that really kind of run independent, right?
Yeah, so we had 3 different offices connected with a WAN, and so that came into play as well. But yeah, we have people in the office, which it worked well in the office, but then when you're going through the internet and all these other things, it was just not too easy to use for us. And they wanted us to move to the newer platform, which was a hybrid where it was cloud-based and the expressways. But by that time, really couldn't say that was a good product for us.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, well, that's basically what made us move.
And Cameron, I know you're in the middle of doing this. You know, we happen to be your UCaaS provider, and we're working with you to making sure that your migration goes smooth. You already kind of touched on some of the challenges, you know, the user experience, you know, people who haven't used, you know, a soft phone, for example, or the Teams environment in general. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Um, how are you working with that? How are you finding success in getting
So
people to
I
use it?
compared to the rest of you, I'm really lucky. We've had UniVoIP for years and years and years, hardwired phones that are voice over IP on everyone's desktop. They work great. Voice quality is great. So I haven't had any of the challenges that the rest of you have had. We're slowly migrating people over, basically one by one, making sure, first of all, that they're able to use Teams 100% and that they understand the product. And then we turn on the phone dial pad for them. People are adopting Teams really quickly and really well because of the chat feature. People are used to chat. As you guys all know, they're used to the phones having chat. And so they've adopted Teams pretty quickly. I started with 0 Teams 4 months ago, 5 months ago, and now we're 100% using Teams. It's still, I still don't have everybody calling office to office using Teams. It's just habit to pick up that phone, and not everybody is converted to an outside DID line for Teams. But the people that have converted over and got used to it, you know, love the product. They love how it works. I have no problem with voice quality. We have great circuits through another company, so it's not that we have any problem with bandwidth at all. So those kind of challenges are very easy. The staff themselves, some people have been here 20 years, 25 years. They're mature staff, so they're used to a physical phone. Upper management itself is used to a physical phone. He's been running the company for 40 years. He's used to picking up that phone and dialing the main people, and he's not going to let that go very easily. He's a little computer challenged. He's amazing with the business and services and grants and all that kind of stuff, but technology isn't his forte. So he needs it to be easy and to work, and so that's going to be the biggest challenge of getting him off of the 4-digit dialing that he's just used to. So he's going to be my last conversion, the last person I convert.
Congratulations. Yeah,
And I'm looking for a really cool endpoint that will help that transition with him. Other than that, it's been really easy and really successful. We haven't had quality of QA quality at all with teams. It's been pretty easy from that point of view. Physically, women don't like headsets. So getting them used to that or finding a headset that is good with them. And it's just a change. Picking it up, putting it on, taking it off, or leaving the headset on when you get a call is really just the only issue that I have with end users.
well, thanks, Cameron. You touched on your pain points. With your old phone system. Do you remember anything more specific about those pain points that you want to share with others, and tell us, how that pain point was resolved when you finished your migration?
So
And I'm
was
putting
that
you on the spot.
no, was that for me? Because you cut out in the beginning. Okay. Yeah. So the pain points were really some hardware conflicts with resources between teams, because we were using Teams. I always say that COVID was a bad thing for everybody, but for technologists, we think it was a good thing for us because it forced adoption of technology that otherwise wouldn't have been quickly adopted. Teams was one of them, Zoom was one of them, because we had to maintain business and we had to do meetings and things like that. And a lot of people were remote in California. As you know, they had the governor mandate where everybody was at home for a period of time. So the thing with the old provider is they had their own proprietary client, if you will. And so that had to be running all the time for you to get a call, for you to see your voicemail, for you to interact with it. And then you had Teams running in the background. So if you had Zoom, then you had a third one. So we had these conflicts with, the phone ringing and the person not hearing the phone because they were on Teams and they were doing something. And so there was those conflicts where they would look and they would get a voicemail. So they would miss an important call from a client. Because if you think about it, and the services that we provide, it takes a lot of courage to call and ask for help. And so the person makes that call, they might not call back if they don't get an answer. And so we pride ourselves in providing services to the clients as the calls are coming in. So that was one of the pain points. The other pain point that we had was service and support. So we'd run into an issue where something wasn't working. We had, they called them hunt groups. We had a hunt group set up. The calls weren't being routed correctly. I don't know whether it was lack of knowledge about the system or the way the system was originally configured, but it took us days and weeks to get answers to calls. And we even had an outage that lasted almost a week. I don't remember if it was Broadcom or something on the East Coast where, people would call in and they couldn't hear us or we couldn't hear them. And so for all purposes, we were down. And so in a business like this where somebody's seeking help or you're trying to, potentially be an advocate for a patient somewhere, those are not good situations to be in. I was talking earlier about before when they transitioned, there was 3 months without phones. Think about somebody calling in with a suicide or something like that, and the call got dropped, and this is real. How do you get in touch with that person if they're not calling from a reachable phone number? And so, where a lot of people think telephony is dead, we really rely on our voice connection with clients. So those are some of the pain points. There were my team, my technical support analyst, the desktop side, they'd roll out a new client. We would get like a day's notice or 2 days notice that this new client was coming. And we'd push it out through our managed engine server. Well, obviously it's not going to reach everybody on the first push. So there were people down for a couple of days when that client quit working. So those are just some of the pain points, and the difference is just real quickly in contrasting. Teams is there. It has updates, and most of the updates come out and pushed with the systems updates that we run, and so it's much, much, much easier to manage.
Yeah, to your point, there's studies that show, if the user is focused in their, during their workflow with the tools they use, they save significant number of hours per week, just because they don't have to go from one application to the next. But you also highlight the administration challenges for that. Now you have to deploy 2 different clients at every desktop, a third-party phone system and then the Teams. And I can tell you from experience that the Teams client works great with consistent user experience across all devices. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to worry about, installing this app here and that app over there, and how do these apps integrate. I have stories to tell you. I remember one time, one of these third-party clients would basically hog your microphone and your speaker. So when you tried to run another app, you didn't have the speaker, you couldn't use it because the speaker was already being used by something else. And so now you've got 2 different clients competing for your resources on your computer, and it was really crazy. So David, what are some of your pain points prior to this migration, and how have those been rectified or not?
Yeah, it was mainly the drop calls. We were getting drop calls left and right. It was really hard to figure out when it happened or how, but we would just know we'd suddenly get calls that this was drop call, and it was pretty consistent. We currently have about 4,000 calls. Is it a week or a day? I forget what we're at, but we have a lot of calls per day, and it's really important to keep those going with the families because sometimes it's in critical need of emergency things. So keeping the phones active was really important for us. The issue that we always ran into was just the drop calls. Trying to investigate it, it would take days sometimes for our technicians, not only internally but on contract, to investigate the problem. And they would say, "Oh, it's been fixed," and then suddenly it'd reappear less than a few days later. And their suggestion was just to restart everything. And it wasn't very easy to get through those times. And we have these meetings I think it's every other month, where employees can get together and say, well, what would they like fixed, or what would they like seen to be looked into? And that constantly came up was the phones, pretty much all the time since COVID happened, because when we were purchasing the system, we knew it had this capability and it seemed to work. No one really complained about having any issues. But then when we finally all went home, the thing just was not working for us at all. So, it's been difficult. And also, at the time, we had 3 different clients. We would have Zoom. We would have I think Jabber is the name of it. Then we would have Teams. And so, which one were they using for what? And by consolidating into Teams, it made more sense that way, because we knew we were using in-house communication with Teams. It was a lot easier. People just started using it. People started forming their own channels and their own chats. And so we noticed that was our backbone for communication during COVID. And it became easy just to decide we're going to add the phone line to that. But that was probably our biggest painstake, is having drop calls of 3 different systems, and yeah, consolidating really did help us with that. And adoption became really easy for us because of COVID. Everyone started using it just to communicate over the phone, and it had video. Even though I think the other client did, it's just people didn't know how to use it. They didn't even know it had video. And then I don't even know if the video would have crashed too. So it's kind of hard to say what would have happened with that system. But yeah, Teams has been great for us because it's been stable. And like I said, we got a lot of call volume. It's like 4,000. I gotta remember if it's a day or a week, but it's a lot. I think it's a day.
Yeah, no, thanks. And Cameron, how do you see your users potentially being more productive when you're all finished? What is the workflow of a regular knowledge worker look like? In terms of productivity.
So, I mean, having, first of all, knowing where somebody is, we do work from home, and seeing that presence, I think, is the most important and fun aspect of the system. You immediately know if somebody's at their desk and they're not, so you're not wasting time calling somebody. A lot of times we need a quick answer. Again, we work with services and with participants, so leaving a voicemail or sending emails and waiting for a response when that participant is actually on the line, it actually helps our case managers to be able to see that their case manager or another case manager they're working with is there right away. So I think the biggest selling point for us is the presence. We know they're there. We know if that person's not available, we can find somebody immediately that we can either transfer the call to or conference that call to, that's going to help the participant and the need that's present right away. So I think it shortens the interaction, that touch point.
Yeah, when you have their attention with a chat, then it's easy to escalate into a phone call because you already have their attention. You're not just calling somebody out of the blue and getting voicemail half the time. Here you can have the conversation via chat and escalate to a phone call or a voice call. Teams, Microsoft keeps adding new features, right? Back in 2019, when we first started to support voice for Microsoft Teams, there's been a night and day, and it continues to get better. So from a features perspective, it's at par with any phone system out there. And then it does things that the other phone systems just simply can't do. An example of that is how you begin a one-on-one call with somebody, and you can ad hoc turn that into a meeting by inviting more people into that call. So a one-on-one call becomes an N-way conference call. So the line between the conferencing and phone call really is not just blurred, it's invisible because it's the same process. You make a phone call or you have a meeting, you do it exactly the same way. So Paul, I'd be interested to know if you can pinpoint any productivity benefits from a user's perspective when they use Teams as opposed to your old phone system.
Definitely. So we have less downtime, and the ease of use and questions are less. So less training because the users are all familiar with Teams. The integrated functionality with Exchange is nice because not only do you have your voicemail available in Teams, but it comes in through email. We have a couple of people here with disabilities, so that the translation has been helpful. We didn't have that in our old system where the voicemails were translated. It's extremely helpful for Access Department, which is our intake department, where they're receiving, 150, 200, sometimes 400 voicemails a day. For them to click on the voicemail, look in the preview pane, kind of tell what it's about, forward it to the right department, because that line is not actively answered, so everything is a voicemail. And then Yeah, the functionality, even with faxing and text messaging that UniVoIP offered us, has been helpful as well. We were really hesitant in some areas about we had extensions as well. I think Cameron mentioned he had extensions. We thought that was going to be an issue for us as well. But it's kind of like a flawless operation, because when they transfer a call, they type a name in, it pops up. They don't have to type the numbers in, and it just becomes more or less kind of like a retraining. So it was very easy to adopt for us because we were already using Teams so heavily. So yeah.
Yeah, for external folks getting to your inside your organization and talk to a specific person, Microsoft obviously does have an IVR, auto attendant, and call queuing or hunt groups, and it has a very nice speech detection engine. So in the old days, somebody would call the IVR and they would say, press 1 for this, 2 for that, and for a dial by name directory, press whatever, right? And then you press that, and it would say, please say, or please enter the first few letters of the person's first name or last name. I mean, how many of us have gone through that? It's painful. With Teams, out of the box, nothing to configure, has speech detection. So now you can just say, please say the name of the person you wish to reach. And the caller can say the name, and it finds all the matches, or the only match, or few matches, and it transfers the call. So really, there is no need for extension dialing from the IVR either, because they just say the name and they get routed. I just wanted to point that out. David, what about, I know one of the productivity benefits is the ability for employees to work from home, because with Teams, they can be anywhere. They can be at the office, they could be working from home. There is no IT overhead to making sure, as long as they have, public IP access, they have access to Teams from anywhere. That's one productivity benefit, I guess, when you're able to work from home that easily. But other than that, from a workflow perspective of each one of the users, is there something that sticks out for you?
It had to be the translation from voicemail to text, and the transcription too. We do have a lot of different languages out there, and it seemed to cover a lot of those scenarios. There's just one we're waiting for Microsoft. I don't know if he's still here, but we could mention Mong Da. We're looking for the release of that. It'd be very helpful. But yeah, the translation's been very good for us. We never had a type of system like that, and yeah, immediately staff are very appreciative to not have to listen to voicemail and to just be able to read it. And it seems like it's better than it was a few years ago, but it seems like it's working really well, and everybody, like, they really prefer to have that. We also did use directory search, like you said. That did have, I think, 30% decrease in calls to our receptionists. So that's been great since we've been expanding, and hiring is difficult. With our size anyways. It seems like we're tapping out the market. But yeah, we've been using that quite a bit, and it's been very helpful for productivity. The auto attendant, like you said, we used to record voices that would be on the phone when you're calling, and we now use the auto attendant, and we're able to create all these different strategies for how we're going to filter these calls, and it's been really easy to set up. And we also have managers that like the manager special for the call queues, so that's been great too.
Call queues, I frame it by saying it's the old hunt group or call group on steroids, because it has a lot of exception, settings that you can set up. What happens if there are too many people holding? You can put people on hold. Whereas in a call group, it would basically just, when everybody's on the phone, it would just send it to a voicemail. Here, you can actually queue the calls, which is important. So Paul, what's your experience in terms of cost? We talked about productivity, and users are more productive. They can the admin overhead is less by using this. But what about before and after? What are your cost comparisons look like?
So, so I want to add something real quick about the productivity because I completely overlooked the auto attendant. We had an operator that actually answered every single call before we transitioned over to Teams, and then we took advantage. Executive management was a little bit hesitant about doing it, but we implemented the auto attendant, and we feel like more clients are getting through than before. We felt like we might have had a lot of abandoned calls before. So that's another area of productivity. As far as costs, we are saving about $120,000 a year by using Teams in comparison to our other provider. And as I said earlier, we were very limited to the functionality that they were providing to us, and everything or every module or every auto attendant or every hunt group, there was a charge attached to it. And so, yeah, so from the provider perspective, we're saving about $120,000 a year. That includes adding functionality that we didn't have before, like the SMS texting and the faxing that were separate charges through other, and putting it into an all unified communication in one package so that people have two tools really, but they're all connected. We have our Outlook client, our Exchange, and then our Teams environment. And so as a means of communication.
Thanks, Paul. Cameron, I know you're going to save from going from our UCaaS service to our Cloud Voice for Microsoft Teams platform. Can you quantify that yet, or is that because I know you're going to save significant amount of money?
Yeah, I was hoping for half, but I didn't realize Microsoft licensing was as expensive and as needy as it is. So it's going to be a third, I think. The challenge I have resource centers in each of my 8 offices where.
Oh, you went on mute, Cameron, accidentally.
I talked all that time. Darn, sorry about that. I was hoping at a 50% reduction in cost, but Microsoft Teams licensing is more expensive than I thought it would be. So I'm going to get a third reduction in cost at the end. What I was saying is I have 8 resource centers, so I have to have physical phones in some of those centers, which I hadn't counted on buying new physical phones. There are resource centers where participants come in from the outside, from the street, to use our computers, and fax machines, printers, and all that kind of stuff. But there has to be a phone in there where they would call services, not only within house, but also outside services, EDD, or whomever they have to call. So I have to buy 8 phones at least for those resource centers. We also have main receptions in each of the offices, and that's going to be a big cultural change to try to get them to use Teams. So I might have to buy physical phones for those receptions who sit there and answer calls. I'm listening closely to the call routing that you guys are doing, and if it can be a queue or whatever, but the level of people that call in kind of need that individual to answer and direct them because they don't really know where they're going or who they should talk to in each part of our organization. So I'm struggling with that first to figure out but I'm definitely going to get a figure per endpoint, a third cost savings at the end of the day.
Even with the licensing from Microsoft?
Even with the licensing from you guys took good care of us. UniVoIP did with the costs, for nonprofits. So unlike some of the other people I think that are out there, we had a great plan already.
Great. And David, what is your cost savings, prior and then after?
So it's we're a little different. It seemed like most of our saving was in hardware. If we go into the count for hardware on just estimates we had, it was going to cost somewhere of like 600,000. So that was automatically just savings right there. We did go with phones. We did want to have the transition easier because we do have staff that worked for us for 30, 40 plus years and they're used to using a phone. So we did buy hardware for that. I also was including stuff for headsets, SMS, and the virtual fax. So including all that, it came really close, I think, to our previous cost, even though that was still going to increase. So I didn't even see the plans for that. So I'm sure we would have saved money on the licensing, but we saw a lot of savings on the hardware cost, upward of 600,000. And so that really, it's something I've always wanted to streamline in my department is basically making the costs where you can see them by month or by year without having these large purchases come out of nowhere and try to find money for it. As a nonprofit, it's always hard to find money from 2 years ago or a year ago that's still around, or account for future years. So.
Yeah, David, I just remembered, besides SMS and faxing, you also had overhead paging at your facilities, and we took care of that as well. So, there's really nothing missing. If you need to have a paging solution, a door entry system, SMS, fax, and Paul actually they use our reception console, which is associated with the more advanced contact center. So Cameron, we should have that discussion. About your receptionist. The first question I'm going to ask you is, how many calls do they get per hour? Because if it's really about 20 calls an hour, the team's client is sufficient enough, with a phone or without a phone, for them to handle that kind of a traffic. But if it's going to be more than 20, that's just my rule of thumb. Then we would introduce a Teams reception console as well that you can use. So we complement Microsoft Teams with these other solutions, and we also provide a number management system, which I know, Cameron, is really important to you because you can go in there yourself, take a phone number and unassign it from UCAS and assign it to Teams all by yourself now. But it's important for Paul and David as well, or anyone, that you are in control of all of your phone numbers. You could reserve them, park them, activate them when you need to activate them, and assign them to your users when you need it, and you only pay for what you use, right? So you don't have to, let's say you have a couple hundred telephone numbers and you port them in, but you don't want to activate them all. We allow you to, park them or reserve them for pennies and activate them only when you need to. So we just, talked about the fact that the users seem to be more productive, work from anywhere. There's less admin cost for your IT team, and there's a savings. There's a significant savings, and every scenario is going to be a little different, but there's also a saving. So why aren't more people doing this? Rhetorical question. That's why I keep saying that if somebody's using Microsoft Teams and they're finding that it makes them more productive, it makes no sense to have a third-party phone system because of all those reasons. So let's talk about some of the unexpected challenges that you may have had during this migration process. David, any thoughts on any unexpected challenges or a pleasant surprise perhaps during this process that you can share with the audience?
I think it was basically your guys' system for integrating with Azure. So before, it used to be frustrating for my team to basically plug someone into as a user account, and then suddenly HR said, "Oh, I misspelled their name wrong," and we had to go back and delete the account and restart all over. And with Azure, it's just a simple syncing change. So that's been a great thing for us to have. As far as anything that's been disruptive, I can't really say. I mean, I think there was like a Teams issue a few days ago or a week ago, but that was minor. I don't even think many staff noticed it. Microsoft announced it globally that there was an issue on a certain area of the world. So But overall, I think it's been great for us.
Yeah, Microsoft is very transparent. If you go to your 365 admin center, there's a health monitor, and they'll tell you, even if it's 1% of the users are having issues, they'll tell you. I can tell you from experience that not many UCaaS providers out there are that transparent about their service, but Microsoft is. So, uh, Paul, what about you? Do you have any unexpected challenges that you came across or anything that surprised you during that migration process last year?
Let me think. Well, one thing that was nice is we were able to create some scripting or conditional assignment of licenses through Azure and Active Directory, so that it's basically somebody starts with the organization, they automatically get their license and all of that. We have our Active Directory syncing with our HRIS system. The service control was a very nice tool to have. Being able to select multiple users and make a change, whether it's giving them international access or just assigning numbers to individuals, something that was a ticket each and every time with their old provider. And then one of the things that was a little challenging for us is to get in the mindset of auto attendance and calling queues, because they called them something different. And we did the approach of a lift and shift so that we didn't have a big disruption. Just lifted our existing environment and moved it over into Teams. And now our second phase is looking at all of the call queues and all of the routing and seeing how we can streamline those processes. The queues and auto attendance weren't easy to set up because of that, because we did a lift and shift, and obviously it's a new system and there's some changes that needed to be made. But you all are very helpful in helping us get that to work. And yeah, I think that's really the unexpected was, I guess, the queues. And then one of our areas decided that they needed the reception console. And we had not really planned for the reception console, and that was like in the 9th hour before we went live. And it was more of the way we named the different calling queues and the way we named different things. There needed to be more thought around that for transferring calls. So transferring calls for our receptionist was a little difficult. But then with the 10.4 console, there was more search capability. And so that kind of relieves that issue.
Perfect, thanks. Cameron, how about you so far? Anything unexpected, any challenges besides the extension, having to deal with the CEO and the extension dial?
So I kind of didn't think about the hardware that much, and I had thought everybody had cameras and everybody had a speaker and everybody had headsets. So the biggest challenge for me was all of a sudden people were like, I need a headset, I need a headset. Speakers, because somehow I thought the cameras had a little built-in speaker and they don't. So I had to get an outlay of cameras and speakers and headsets for a lot of people. We're kind of lucky because we have a lot of little offices, individual offices. So those people wanted to have speakers in their offices, and I hadn't thought of that as much. The extension thing is going to be interesting. I right now have configured Teams itself so that the main guy can use extensions for his managers. There's 10 managers that he dials all the time and has those 10 extensions memorized. So I use some fun call routing so that he can literally use his existing UniVoIP phone as an extension dialing, and it calls the Teams DID number. How I'm going to phase that out, I'm not sure yet. I might have to keep those licenses for the 10 managers.
We'll be there for you. We've done thousands of migrations like this for thousands of users, and I can tell you that extension dialing in the very beginning is something that's talked about, but it'll go away. It's not it won't be a showstopper. In fact, people will wonder why they even had to do it before, right? It's like my 14-year-old a few years ago, he was overhearing me talk about, faxing, and he didn't understand. And he's like, what's the point of fax? Faxing is going to be there. It's not going away. And I'm not saying extensions are going to go away, but there is a way to actually communicate with your coworkers through Teams, right?
Groups was an interesting thing for me. I didn't turn off groups. People didn't understand groups, and so I all of a sudden had in Azure, 10,000 different groups. It didn't mean, so I've been trying to figure out how to manage groups at the end user level, having each person create their own group. We have an office called Carson, so now we have 14 different Carson groups. I don't know if you guys had some of those same kind of things with groups. I see.
Yeah,
David's.
we should have a discussion, because your users will now be able to create their own call groups on Teams. So as a user, and of course, as an admin, you can see and manage it if you so wish, but the users will be able to set up a call group and decide whether their calls should ring there simultaneously or to just forward there. So we'll talk about that once we get that far down the line. Their users are actually able to create their own call groups without having the IT being involved in that process, which is really a benefit. So, we're getting to the end of the session, and we'll leave some time for questions. But maybe between David, Paul, and Cameron, what advice do you have for other nonprofit organizations that might be using Teams and they're near the fence to adding Teams to, adding phone system to their Teams experience? Do you have any advice? Maybe we'll start with David.
Yeah, it's really hard to beat Microsoft at their nonprofit discounts. It's something that I think once you pick up the environment, you're going to notice there's more and more stuff you'd like to add because it's something affordable. And tell the other regional centers, if you do, you might end up being more of a Microsoft shop because it's really good pricing for us. So that's one thing.
And Paul, your advice to the nonprofits out there?
Well, we're always asked to do more with less. And so, just piggybacking off David's comments about the nonprofit pricing, that's always something that's really helpful, lets you allocate funds to do other things in other areas. But just some advice would be to, well, first of all, if you want all of your communications to be in one place, I highly recommend it. I mean, we've actually seen people every day adopting it and becoming more comfortable with it and reaching out and asking if it can do this, that, or the other. So we're building on it. We're going into a phase 2 now where we're looking at, I would say divide your project into phases. I don't know the different sizes of the nonprofits. The smaller nonprofit's going to be easier to adopt. Even though we had some challenges with a lift and shift approach, I would say do a lift and shift approach so that there's not a whole lot of organizational change management that needs to take place. Those that are already trained on Teams are going to have a little bit more, are going to be a little bit more ready. So prior Teams training is absolutely helpful. Have an inventory of all your phone numbers, because that's something we ran into, trying to find numbers here and there, realizing you're paging alarm panels, fire panels, and physical fax machines, anything that's analog, and make arrangements with the provider to get those transferred over as well. We had to have a couple of SIP phones because we supported an area that did not adopt Teams. UniVoIP was very helpful in helping us get that up and running. I did mention our paging system, but we also had a paging system that Dean and his group is very helpful in getting that set up. That's tied into our alert media emergency alerting system. So that was extremely beneficial. It's another benefit. Ensure you have QoS enabled on your network. We did not. So we ran into some challenges with all the traffic passing, giving voice and Teams priority on the network, because we all know that video is somewhat forgiving in the way of freezing, but voice is not. You don't get to retransmit those packets. And so that's very important. If you don't have that set up, your provider can help you do that, or you can seek outside help for that. But those are some things that I took away that were helpful. Your provider will give you a project plan. Make sure you have your own internal project plan as well, and proof of concept. Get a proof of concept. If you're unsure, try it. There are providers. UniVoIP was very helpful in setting up a proof of concept with us. I think ours went a little bit longer than most because we were bound to a contract and we had to wait till the contract end date. So
you were very thorough. I would argue that you're very thorough, and that's the way it should be, right? You really wanted to know that this is the right decision, and you made an informed decision at the end of the day.
Yeah, and we also had some numbers assigned to us, temporary numbers that didn't belong to us, that we were able to assign to like my IT group to practice. And we pulled another couple people in from different areas so they could see what that experience was going to be like. And I think that was helpful for buy-in for the rest of the organization.
Good. And Cameron, any advice?
It's a no-brainer. If you're with UniVoIP, you guys have invested in both your software and in Microsoft integrations that make it really, really easy. We did the same thing as Paul, where it was a pilot project with just 5 of us to see how it worked and what pain points there were. We documented what issues each person had and made sure that they were able to successfully transition with minimal effort. And then, if you're a UniVoIP customer now, it's easy to take those numbers and do whatever you want to do with them, or go backwards if you need to. And their software just made it easy to do the ports over to back and forth. Send anybody that's a UniVoIP customer, because I'll tell them to go for it.
Thanks, Cameron. And so for those of you who are not familiar, UniVoIP, we are a solutions partner of Microsoft. We provide PSTN connectivity to Microsoft Teams, but we also ensure that migrations are successful. Our goal is to ensure your desired outcome in terms of your telephony, and share best practice. We also offer a free 30-day trial. You can get real telephone numbers assigned to your Teams environments and kick the tires for yourself. If anyone's interested, just go to univoip.com and click on that yellow 30-day trial button. And you can literally, within 15 minutes of clicking there and authenticating with your Microsoft tenant, you'll be able to assign telephone numbers to your Teams client, just so that you can get a experience of it. And of course, if you need, best practice, if you need project management, if you need, any questions answered to help you during this migration, we are here for you. Please reach out. Again, on our website, you can complete the form, or just call us. Either way, we're here to help. And again, we make the transition to Microsoft phone system easy. That's what we do. And we've built the tools to allow you to do this automatically with a free trial. So we're coming up to the end of the hour. I really want to thank our panel for being here today, their customers, their giving us some of their time, and I'm very appreciative of that, David, Cameron, and Paul. And Carson, I'm handing it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dean and David and Paul and Cameron. Thanks so much for this session. I think the real big takeaway here is there are resources and ways that Microsoft and our partners like UniVoIP can invest and want to invest in really helping our nonprofit partners and customers explore what's possible. We know that telephony can be a challenge, can be a struggle, and we're here to help explore. There's special resources and pricing that's available here. And my team and I exist to really help nonprofits explore that. So thank you so much for the rich dialogue and discussion here today. We'll get the recording out here probably later this week. And if you have any questions or ideas for future sessions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.